On a tense and restless night in Tehran, the city's skyline shimmered under a blanket of uncertainty. The air was thick with anticipation, as if everyone sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. Suddenly, a precision strike was launched by US and Israeli forces, their fighter jets and drones slicing through the darkness. The world watched in disbelief as missiles lit up the night sky, signaling a dramatic escalation in the ongoing conflict. The target was none other than Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In a matter of moments, the man who had shaped Iran's destiny for decades was gone, killed in the attack. News of Khamenei's death sent shockwaves not only through Iran, but across the entire Middle East. Streets filled with stunned crowds and televisions everywhere replayed the breaking news. For over 30 years, Khamenei had been the face and voice of Iran's leadership. His sudden and violent death marked an unprecedented moment in the nation's modern history, leaving a void that few could imagine being filled. Across the country, people gathered in homes, cafes, and public squares, anxiously discussing what might come next. Fear and uncertainty gripped the population, as rumors and speculations spread rapidly. The attack struck at the very heart of Iran's leadership, shaking the foundations of its government and sending security forces scrambling to maintain order. This operation came after months of rising tensions between Iran, Israel, and the West. A series of threats, covert operations, and smaller attacks had set the stage for this explosive moment, making the strike feel almost inevitable. Many Iranians and observers around the world considered Khamenei the glue that held together the country's complex political and religious system. His influence reached every corner of Iranian society. Now, without him, a deep sense of uncertainty and fear gripped the nation. People prayed for stability, but the streets remained eerily quiet, as if holding their breath for what would come next. The killing was especially significant because the supreme leader is Iran's highest authority, wielding immense power over every aspect of the country's life. Unlike the president, the supreme leader controls the military, the courts, and the media. His word is law. And his absence left a dangerous power vacuum at the top. With Khamenei gone, political leaders scrambled to fill the void, but confusion and anxiety reigned. The future of Iran, and perhaps the entire region, suddenly seemed more uncertain than ever. Around the globe, world leaders convened emergency meetings, realizing that the conflict had entered a dangerous and unpredictable new stage. News outlets flashed urgent headlines and the United Nations called for calm. Ordinary people, both in Iran and beyond, feared that the violence could quickly spiral out of control, spreading far beyond Iran's borders and threatening to engulf the entire region in chaos. Iran's government reacted within minutes, calling for national mourning and promising revenge. Millions of Iranians poured into the streets, shouting slogans and waving flags. Some called for peace, but many demanded a strong military response to the attack. The news also spread rapidly across the Middle East. In countries like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, Iran's allies mourned and began preparing for possible conflict. Protests erupted in many cities, with people worried about what the future would bring. Some feared that violence would spill into their countries. Leaders of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the country's most powerful military force, gathered in emergency meetings. They urged the nation to stay united and warned that the response to the killing would be, quote, swift and severe. The army increased its alert level, and reports of troop movements filled the news. In the hours that followed, the mood in the region shifted from shock to fear. Neighbors braced for possible attacks, and governments began to prepare for what could become a much larger war. The US and Israel explained their actions as a necessary step, emphasizing that the strikes were a direct response to what they described as escalating threats from Iran. Officials from both countries appeared before the media, outlining their reasons and stressing the importance of acting swiftly to prevent further instability in the region. Their stated goal was to stop Iran's growing military power, which they claimed posed a significant risk, not only to their own nations, but also to the broader Middle East. The display of Iranian military hardware in Tehran had raised concerns among Western intelligence agencies for months. The strikes, they argued, were also intended to protect their own citizens from potential attacks. Security forces in both countries were put on high alert, and emergency protocols were activated to safeguard civilians. Airstrikes hit several key sites in Tehran, including military headquarters, government buildings, and suspected weapons depots. These attacks were planned with precision using advanced technology and intelligence and were meant to weaken Iran's ability to strike back or coordinate further military operations. The strikes caused heavy damage in the capital. Buildings burned for hours, roads were blocked by debris and fire, and hospitals quickly filled with wounded civilians and military personnel. Emergency services struggled to keep up with the influx of casualties. Many families tried desperately to leave the city, seeking safety from the ongoing attacks. However, roads were jammed with traffic, and the air was filled with the constant sound of sirens, smoke, and the cries of panicked civilians. The sense of fear and uncertainty was overwhelming. The Iranian government declared a state of emergency, urging citizens to remain calm and follow official instructions. US and Israeli military leaders insisted that the strikes targeted only military sites, but Iranian officials reported many civilian casualties and accused the attackers of violating international law. The international community quickly called for calm and restraint, but the damage in Tehran was clear for all to see. The city's skyline was marked by columns of black smoke rising above shattered neighborhoods, and the destruction left thousands without homes or basic services. Both US and Israeli leaders warned that more attacks could come if Iran did not back down, making it clear that the situation could escalate further. The world watched closely, with news outlets providing constant updates, knowing that each new strike could trigger a much larger and more dangerous conflict in the region. Iran's leaders wasted no time in planning their response. Within hours of the initial attacks, top officials gathered in emergency meetings, determined to show strength and resolve. The mood was tense, but the message was clear: Iran would not back down in the face of aggression. The Revolutionary Guard, Iran's elite military force, quickly launched a barrage of missiles targeting US and Israeli positions across the region. These strikes were intended not only as retaliation, but also as a warning to adversaries that Iran was prepared to escalate further if provoked. In addition to direct strikes, Iranian forces targeted airports and military bases in Gulf states allied with the West, including the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Explosions rocked these facilities, causing widespread chaos, grounding flights and sending civilians and military personnel scrambling for safety. Perhaps most dangerously, Iran threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow but vital waterway through which nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes. This move was seen as a direct challenge to the global economy and a signal that Iran could disrupt energy markets at will. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil shipping route, with massive tankers carrying millions of barrels of crude oil every day. Any disruption here would have immediate and far-reaching consequences for global energy supplies. If Iran succeeded in blocking the strait, oil prices could skyrocket overnight. Countries dependent on imported oil would face severe shortages, leading to panic buying, empty gas stations, and economic turmoil around the world. To enforce their threat, Iran deployed fast patrol boats and naval vessels, warning foreign ships to stay away. Tensions rose as Iranian forces intercepted several tankers, heightening fears of a direct military confrontation at sea. Meanwhile, missile strikes and drone attacks hit oil facilities and ports throughout the Gulf region. Fires broke out at key infrastructure sites, and the damage further disrupted oil exports, compounding the crisis. In response, Arab countries scrambled to defend their vital energy supplies. Military units were deployed to protect oil fields and refineries, while leaders held emergency meetings and urgently called for international assistance to prevent further escalation. Shipping companies, fearing for the safety of their crews and vessels, rerouted or halted their operations in the Gulf. The usually busy shipping lanes grew eerily quiet, amplifying the sense of crisis and uncertainty. Through these bold and aggressive actions, Iran demonstrated that it still possessed significant military power and was willing to use it to defend its interests, regardless of the risks. The risk of a wider regional war increased dramatically. World leaders, alarmed by the rapid escalation, convened emergency meetings at the United Nations and urged all sides to step back from the brink, warning that further conflict could have catastrophic consequences for the entire world. The fighting quickly disrupted daily life for millions of people. Almost all major airlines canceled flights in and out of Iran, Israel, and the Gulf region. Airports in cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi shut down, stranding travelers and making it impossible for many to return home. Inside Iran, the government cut off internet access and blocked social media to stop the spread of rumors. Many people could not call their families or get news from outside, Schools and businesses closed, and empty streets became common as people stayed home in fear. Supermarkets and gas stations saw long lines as residents rushed to buy supplies. In Tehran and other cities, some buildings lost electricity or water for hours at a time. Hospitals struggled to treat the wounded, and ambulances raced through the streets. The sense of fear and uncertainty was everywhere. Many worried that the violence could get even worse or spread to new areas, making life even harder for ordinary families. World leaders responded swiftly to the crisis. China, Russia, and North Korea condemned the US-Israeli strike, calling it illegal and dangerous. They warned that the attack could destabilize the region for years to come and called for an immediate ceasefire. The European Union and the United Nations urged both sides to show restraint and avoid more violence. Many leaders expressed deep concern about the rising civilian toll and damage to vital infrastructure. The United Nations Security Council held emergency meetings to discuss possible peace efforts. Some Western countries supported the US and Israel's view that Iran's actions had led to the crisis. Others called for talks and offered to help mediate. Protests broke out in several countries, with people demanding that their leaders act to stop the war. Despite these calls, no agreement was reached, and the fighting continued. The world watched anxiously, worried that the conflict could spiral out of control. With Khamenei gone, Iran's government moved fast to keep control. A provisional council led by Ayatollah Alireza Arafi took power. The president and top military leaders joined the council, promising to protect Iran's independence and punish those responsible for the attack. But, the situation was tense inside Iran. Some groups within the government and military competed for more influence. The Revolutionary Guard, with its own weapons and loyal followers, played a big role in shaping the country's response. Rumors of secret meetings and possible plots spread throughout the capital. Ordinary Iranians worried about what the new leadership would do. Many hoped for peace and stability, but others feared that the power struggle could lead to more violence or even civil unrest. The new leaders struggled to show strength and unity while facing huge challenges both at home and abroad. The world's eyes stayed fixed on Tehran, waiting to see whether the new council could hold the country together or if more chaos would follow. The crisis rocked global markets almost instantly. Oil prices jumped to their highest point in years as companies worried about shortages and disruptions. The threat to the Strait of Hormuz made investors nervous, since so much of the world's oil passes through this narrow path. Stock markets in the Middle East and beyond fell sharply. Companies linked to energy, shipping, and travel suffered the most. Many businesses paused operations or closed entirely, waiting to see what would happen next. In Iran and the Gulf, ordinary people felt the impact as well. Prices for food, fuel, and medicine rose quickly. Some banks limited withdrawals, and supermarkets struggled to keep shelves stocked. Governments tried to calm people's fears. But honestly, the uncertainty made daily life difficult. Economists said that if the conflict continued, countries around the world could face slower growth and higher costs. The risk of a major global recession grew as the fighting dragged on. The Iran-Israel war showed no signs of ending soon. Both sides exchanged threats and carried out more attacks, keeping the whole region on edge. Neighboring countries increased their defenses and worried about being drawn into the fighting. The death of Iran's supreme leader changed the balance of power in the Middle East, but it also created new dangers. No one knew how the new leaders would act or whether they could keep the country together. The threat of more violence, both inside Iran and across the region, remained high. World leaders continued to call for peace and warned of the risks if the war spread further. Humanitarian groups feared that millions of people could suffer if the fighting got worse or lasted a long time. As the crisis dragged on, uncertainty and fear became the new normal in the Middle East. The world watched and waited, hoping that a path to peace could be found before even greater disasters unfolded.